The glare from the studio lights felt less like illumination and more like a physical judgment on the two women standing before the bench. This was the set of Judge Judy, and in the center sat Judge Judith Shaindlin, a woman whose patience had long been surgically removed and whose gaze could turn a liar's suit jacket to ash. On the left was Elena Ellie Vance, 78, petite, frail, and dressed in a lilac cardigan that looked far too thin for the weight of the grievance she was carrying. Her face was a roadmap of genuine worry lines. She was the plaintiff, suing for $5,000 to cover alleged property damage and emotional distress. On the right stood the defendant, Karen K.C. Chandler, 42, clad in a sleek, if slightly too tight, business skirt and a veneer of aggressive entitlement. K.C. was a mid-level real estate agent who had rented a guest house from Alina and, according to Alina's claim, had trashed the property before moving out early. The lie that started it all. The case had begun simply with Alina recounting in a soft, halting voice how K.C. had not only left a gaping hole in the drywall but had also stolen a family heirloom, a silver locket. Judge Judy cut to the chase, her voice a low, gravelly thunder. "Ms. Chandler, you say you paid your rent and left the place spotless, yet there is photographic evidence of this damage and a sworn statement from the plaintiff about a missing locket. Explain yourself." Casey smirked, crossing her arms. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. Look at her, she's senile. She's trying to shake me down because I refuse to pay her exorbitant cleaning fee. The gaping hole was a chip the size of a quarter, and the locket, she probably misplaced it in her own dementia-riddled mess." The courtroom audience shifted uncomfortably. Elena flinched as if struck. "Do not insult the plaintiff, Ms. Chandler," Judge Judy warned, her tone flat and dangerous. "Address the claim, not the person, and certainly not her age. Now about this cleaning fee, was it unreasonable?" "Yes, it was $1,000 to clean a two-bedroom cottage, and she kept calling me, harassing me. I told her I had a life, a business to run. She's retired. She has nothing but time on her hands to needle people." Casey leaned into the microphone, her frustration boiling over into open arrogance. "Honestly, Your Honor, I shouldn't even be here. This is a waste of your time and mine. She's old, she's lonely, and she's clearly delusional." Judge Judy's famous pointed finger shot out. "You seem to confuse a claim for damages with a personal insult, Ms. Chandler. I am asking you." The fatal misstep, 36 seconds. It happened in the blink of an eye. Judge Judy, preparing to deliver a classic judicial smackdown, paused for air. It was a fractional silence, but KC, blinded by her own fury and entitlement, saw it as an opportunity. She interrupted the most famous judge on television, waving a dismissive hand. "Your Honor, with all due respect," Casey began, but the word was drenched in sarcasm. She then raised her chin and looked directly into the camera, clearly trying to play to the audience she thought would be on her side. "You're a strong woman, you've had a great career, but you need to remember the order of things. Alina here is confused. Your Honor, you are getting up there too, you really need to." Casey lowered her voice slightly, adopting a patronizing, saccharine tone that was chilling in its condescension. "Respect your elders." A palpable gasp swept through the gallery. The bailiff, Petri Hawkins Bayed, visibly straightened, his face shifting from stone to shock. Judge Judy's expression didn't change for a beat, but her eyes narrowed to twin points of glacial fury. The clock on the wall, visible just over the plaintiff's head, ticked the 36th second since KC had started her interruption. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was amplified into a roar by the microphone. "Ms. Chandler, this court is not a forum for life advice. It is a court of law, and you have just committed the cardinal sin of this courtroom, contempt of my authority and of the rule of law." KC had the gall to attempt another interruption, but your Hun. "Silence!" The command was like a whip crack. Judge Judy slapped her pen down onto the desk, the sound echoing throughout the silent studio. She reached for a specific, seldom-used gavel. "You came in here with dirt on your hands, attempting to fleece an elderly woman for your own selfish gain. You then compounded that crime with rank, open, undisguised contempt for the very institution that is attempting to seek justice on her behalf. You called her senile, you insulted her character, and now you have lectured me." Her eyes bored into Casey's. "Ms. Vance sued for $5,000. I am ruling in her favor for the full amount of $5,000, which will be deducted from your appearance fee." Casey let out a short, incredulous laugh. $5,000, ha, fine, it's worth it to teach that old bat a lesson. The EERIE Karma begins. Oh, we're not done, Miss Chandler, Judge Judy said, her lips barely moving. I am invoking a rarely used power granted to me under my contract to impose a penalty for egregious, willful, and spectacular misconduct, a level of disrespect that threatens the dignity of this entire process. She raised the gavel, its polished wood gleaming. The case is resolved. The penalty for contempt of court in the amount of $25,000 is hereby levied against the defendant, Ms. Karen Chandler, and shall be paid immediately from any remaining appearance fees and, if necessary, secured by the production company. Bam! The gavel struck the block, a sound of absolute devastating finality. Casey's face instantly drained of color, the arrogant mask shattering into 1,000 pieces of pure animal fear. Her hands flew to her mouth. $25,000, Judge, you can't, that's more than I just did, Judge Judy stated coolly. Bailiff, escort Ms. Chandler out of my courtroom. Her case is closed. Her dignity, like her money, is now gone. And here is a piece of advice for you, young woman. Respect is earned, but the law demands deference. You showed neither. As Casey was led away, visibly shaking and sobbing a mixture of rage and terror, she screamed one last, desperate word. Lies, this is all lies. Elena Vance, the elderly plaintiff, watched the spectacle with wide, astonished eyes. As the doors closed, she turned to Judge Judy. Your Honor, she whispered, that fine, it feels excessive, but I think perhaps some things are bigger than money. Judge Judy just looked at her, a strange, weary expression on her face. Indeed, Ms. Vance, indeed they are, and sometimes karma arrives via FedEx, signed for by the bailiff. Next, end of part 1. The court ruled the fine was levied and Karen Chandler's life was instantly flipped upside down. But was her scream of lies just the outburst of a ruined woman, or did the true depth of her deception and the strange, devastating string of events that followed justify the judge's eerie warning? Karen Chandler, once so sleek and composed, was now a meme, her tear-streaked face plastered across every major news and entertainment site. The clip of her demanding Judge Judy respect her elders before being instantly decimated with a $25,000 contempt fine had gone supernova, trending globally within hours. The media dubbed her KC the Contempt Queen. Immediate financial execution. The reality show production company, eager to maintain its strict, non-negotiable contractual authority and fueled by the judge's command, acted instantly. KC's appearance fee, which was roughly $1,500, was immediately seized and directed to Elena Vance. The remaining $23,500 was invoiced to KC with an attached 48-hour deadline before the case was handed to a debt collection agency. True to her combative nature, KC refused to pay. She hired a low-level, ambulance-chasing attorney, a man named Marcus Vaughn, and immediately filed a lawsuit against the production company and Judge Shainlin herself, citing cruel and unusual financial punishment and abuse of judicial discretion. This was a move fueled by pure desperate rage, a desire to prove that she, Karen Chandler, was not someone who could be dismissed or penalized by an old woman on TV. The exposure of the deception. KC's lawsuit was the greatest mistake of her life. The production company, defending itself against a multi-million-dollar suit, was granted broad discovery. When they began digging into KC's finances and professional history to prove her character or lack thereof, the truth behind Elena Vance's complaint and KC's aggression cascaded into public view. It turned out that KC Chandler wasn't just a rude tenant, she was a serial financial predator. The missing locket, the silver locket, wasn't just a sentimental piece. It was a distinctive antique, one of a set appraised at $8,000. Investigators found that KC, a real estate agent, had a history of acquiring small, valuable items from the properties she rented or managed, often targeting elderly, single homeowners who she knew would have difficulty tracking or proving the theft. The chip, the gaping hole in the drywall, wasn't from a dropped book. KC had been installing an unauthorized, illegal lockbox on the guest house to rent it out herself on a short-term rental site, attempting to double-dip on the rent. When Elena discovered it and threatened eviction, KC ripped the box out, destroying the wall, and left. The senility lie: Elena Vance was not demented or senile. She was a retired mathematics professor with a sharp mind. Casey's insistence on painting Alina as delusional was a calculated, abusive tactic used to invalidate the elder's testimony and paint herself as the victim of a confused old woman. When the discovery documents hit the press, Casey's real estate license was suspended pending an ethics review. The lies Casey had screamed about in the courtroom were not the case itself, but the entire facade of her moral character. The EERIE Karma manifests. As Casey's legal battle to overturn the $25,000 fine began, a chilling, highly improbable series of events began to unfold, events that seemed to target the very objects and symbols of Casey's greed and disrespect. The EERIE Karma had arrived. The targeting of the assets. 1. The luxury car, the symbol of status. Casey prided herself on her fully paid-off black Mercedes-Benz S-Class, which she frequently used to impress potential clients. One afternoon, while testifying in her lawsuit against the show, a flash flood, highly unusual for that dry inland district, caused a sewer main to burst directly beneath the courthouse parking garage. Casey's Mercedes was the only car completely submerged in foul, toxic water. The engine was hydrolocked and the interior was totaled. Insurance denied the claim, citing gross negligence by the city, leaving Casey with a $70,000 paperweight. 2. The investment property, the symbol of greed. Casey's primary asset was a small commercial rental property she had purchased to flip. She had ruthlessly evicted a small, family-owned bakery from the space just a month prior, ignoring the owner's pleas. Weeks later, as she stood outside the vacant space with a new buyer, a rogue dump truck swerving to avoid a stray dog lost its load. The load. Thousands of pounds of concrete rubble which completely collapsed the storefront awning, damaging the structure so severely that the property was immediately condemned as structurally unsound. The buyer walked, and Casey was suddenly holding a massive, unsellable liability. 3. The voice, the symbol of disrespect. The most chilling event occurred just before Casey was due back in court. Casey had a distinct, sharp voice which she weaponized in the courtroom to talk over Alina and the judge. One evening, after a particularly vitriolic, drunken phone call to her now-suspended boss, Casey woke up with a horrific case of spasmodic dysphonia. It was not a common cold. It was a rare neurological disorder that caused her vocal cords to involuntarily spasm, leaving her voice a strained, harsh whisper, often breaking into uncontrollable squeaks and grunts. She could barely speak, let alone argue or negotiate. The diagnosis was permanent. Her voice, the instrument of her constant disrespect, was gone. The final judgment. Casey's lawsuit against Judge Judy and the show finally reached the summary judgment phase. Her lawyer, Vaughn, attempted to argue that the $25,000 fine was disproportionate to the offense. Judge Judy, through her own legal representation, submitted a brief that was a masterwork of legal and ethical evisceration. It highlighted the discovered evidence of Casey's elder abuse scheme, detailing how the courtroom contempt was not a momentary lapse, but the culmination of a pattern of deliberate, calculated psychological and financial warfare against an elderly, vulnerable person. The reviewing judge, having seen the evidence and the viral video, was unambiguous. The contempt shown by Ms. Chandler was not merely for the presiding officer, but for the inherent dignity of the law itself, and critically, for the fundamental ethical standard of decency owed to our elders. The $25,000 fine is a symbolic measure, a financial price on the ethical degradation committed. Furthermore, Ms. Chandler's subsequent civil suit against the court is deemed frivolous and brought in bad faith. Casey lost the lawsuit. She was ordered to pay the full $25,000 fine, and worse, she was ordered to pay the production company's legal fees, totaling an additional $50,000. Stripped of her license, ruined financially by the fine and the legal fees, and silenced by the bizarre, rare affliction of her voice, Casey Chandler finally faced the quiet truth. The moment she had demanded the world respect her elders, while actively defrauding one, had sealed her fate. The aftermath, justice and serenity. Alina Vance, the retired professor, received her $5,000. She used a small portion of it to repair the guest house damage and the rest to fund a local literacy program for seniors. She never spoke of Casey again. When asked about the string of unfortunate events that had befallen her former tenant, she only smiled gently. "When you sow disrespect into the garden of life, my dear," Alina once told a reporter, her eyes sparkling with the wisdom of her years, "sometimes the harvest is not just thorns but a thunderbolt." The camera panned to the judge's chair, now empty. The $25,000 fine, the immediate justice, had been merely the trigger. The EERIE Karma had taken the baton, ensuring that the punishment perfectly mirrored the crime, a profound and lasting destruction of the tools and symbols Casey had used to perpetrate her lies and her contempt. The story became an enduring legend in the reality court world, a chilling testament that in Judge Judy's courtroom and sometimes in the world beyond it, justice doesn't just resolve a case, it exacts a toll. The full story has been completed, fulfilling the core narrative requirements and incorporating the requested elements of lies, justice, and eerie karma for maximum audience impact.